I've learned that some crimes don't happen in secret. They happen in plain sight, in places people pass through every day, places that feel ordinary enough to lower your guard. This is one of those cases. On the night of October 20th, 2024, Rhiannon Whyte finished her shift at the Park Inn Hotel in Walsall. She was 27 years old, a hotel worker, a mother to a young son. She did what she had done countless times before. She walked home. Rhiannon made her way toward Bescott Stadium railway station. A short, familiar route. Lit. Public. The kind of walk most people don't think twice about. But that night, she wasn't alone. CCTV footage would later show a man leaving the hotel shortly after her, following. Not beside her. Not ahead of her. Behind. By the time Rhiannon reached the station platform, the cameras there weren't working. What happened next wasn't recorded. But the outcome was. Rhiannon Whyte was attacked on the platform. She was stabbed 23 times. The weapon wasn't a knife. It was a screwdriver. 11 of those wounds penetrated her skull. That detail matters, because it tells investigators something important. This wasn't reckless violence. This wasn't a single blow delivered in panic. It was sustained, focused, and deliberate. A train driver later found Rhiannon slumped inside a shelter, alive, but gravely injured. She was rushed to hospital, where she fought for her life for 3 days. On October 23, 2024, Rhiannon Whyte died from her injuries. The man accused of killing her was Deng Chol Majek, a Sudanese national. He had arrived in the United Kingdom less than 3 months earlier, after crossing the channel in a small boat. Majek was not living independently. He was being housed in temporary accommodation, and that accommodation placed him inside the same hotel where Rhiannon worked. That detail matters, because proximity creates familiarity, and familiarity lowers defenses. To staff, he was known, not personally, not socially, but visually. Employees later told police they had noticed him. The way he watched female staff members, the way his attention lingered. Long enough to feel uncomfortable. Long enough to be remembered. At the time, those observations didn't translate into action, because staring, by itself, isn't a crime. It sits in a gray area. Unsettling, but easy to dismiss. Easy to explain away. But in hindsight, those moments take on a different weight, because they suggest this wasn't a random encounter. Rhiannon wasn't chosen by chance. She was noticed, observed, and ultimately followed. Majek's recent arrival in the UK became a point of discussion during the trial. Not as an excuse, not as an explanation, but as context. Context matters because it shapes how events unfold, not how they are judged. The court was clear on that. No amount of displacement, instability, or transition excuses violence, but understanding the environment in which a crime occurs helps explain how it became possible. Majek had arrived in a country he did not know. He had no established community, no long-term routine, no history that stretched back far enough for patterns to be recognized early. He existed, for the most part, outside of familiarity, and people who exist on the edges are often noticed only when something goes wrong. The discussion of his arrival timeline wasn't about sympathy. It was about proximity. How quickly he moved from unknown to present. How rapidly his path intersected with Rhiannon's daily life. 3 months is not a long time, but it was long enough to observe, long enough to fixate, long enough to act. The trial made an important distinction. Majek's background did not cause the crime. His actions did. But the speed at which those actions emerged highlighted a difficult truth. Violence doesn't always come from long histories. Sometimes it comes from brief overlaps. Context, in this case, served one purpose. It showed how quickly a dangerous situation can develop when warning signs exist, but lack a clear framework to be addressed. Because systems are often designed to respond to records, to patterns over time, not to discomfort, not to intuition. And by the time context becomes visible in a courtroom, it's usually because it was missed in real life. Too late to intervene. Too late to protect. Leaving the court to do the only thing it can do afterward. Account for what happened, and sentence the person responsible. But never undo the harm that made context necessary in the first place. It underscored how quickly paths can cross. how little time it can take for someone to move from stranger to presence, and how dangerous that presence can become when warning signs are missed or misunderstood. In cases like this, the timeline matters, not because it explains violence, but because it shows how little margin there can be between arrival and devastation. Majek wasn't a stranger to Rhiannon. He had been staying at the same hotel where she worked. Staff later told police they had noticed his behavior. The staring, prolonged, uncomfortable. Women described it as spooky, scary. Concerns had been raised, but nothing that at the time suggested what would follow. The case against Majek didn't rely on a single piece of evidence. It relied on accumulation, a digital trail, forensics, and behavior that became impossible to explain away. Although the stabbing itself wasn't captured on camera, CCTV told the rest of the story. Footage from inside the park and hotel cafeteria showed Majek watching Rhiannon and other female staff throughout the evening. Not glancing, watching, long enough to stand out. Cameras then captured him following Rhiannon out of the hotel, across the car park, up the stairs, toward the station platform, always behind her, always closing distance. After the attack, CCTV picked him up again, running from the station, crossing a bridge, stopping long enough to throw something into the River Tame. That item would later be identified as Rhiannon's mobile phone. Majek then did something that would leave an indelible impression on the jury. He went to a shop, bought beer, and returned to the hotel. Less than 90 minutes after the attack, CCTV captured him in the hotel car park, laughing, dancing, moving casually. Behind him, blue emergency lights flashed from the crime scene. That footage became central to the trial, not because it proved guilt on its own, but because it showed absence of remorse, absence of confusion, absence of shock. Throughout the investigation, Majek denied being the person in the footage. He claimed, repeatedly, "It wasn't me," despite wearing a distinctive jacket with a dark square patch clearly visible on camera. Forensic evidence removed any remaining doubt. Police recovered the screwdriver used in the attack. Rhiannon's blood was found on the tip. Majek's DNA was found on the handle. Blood matching Rhiannon's profile was also found on Majek's jacket, the same jacket seen on CCTV before and after the attack. Divers recovered Rhiannon's phone from the River Tame. The location where it was thrown matched Majek's path, captured on camera step by step. Prosecutors described the forensic evidence as overwhelming, and the jury agreed. On October 24, 2025, at Wolverhampton Crown Court, Deng Chol Majek was found guilty of murder. But sentencing would be delayed, because another question needed answering. How old was he? Majek claimed he was 19 years old, born in 2005. That claim mattered, because sentencing guidelines for a teenager differ significantly from those for an adult. Majek had no official documentation, so the court ordered a Merton-compliant age assessment. Social workers and experts examined his physical appearance, his demeanor, his history. Their conclusion was clear. Majek was likely between 25 and 28 years old. The judge, Mr. Justice Goss, accepted the findings. For sentencing purposes, Majek was treated as being 26. On January 30, 2026, Deng Chol Majek was sentenced to life imprisonment, with a minimum term of 29 years. During sentencing, Rhiannon's family addressed the court. Their words carried a weight no evidence ever could. Her sister, Alexandra Whyte, described the attack as vicious and pitiless. She called Majek demonic and inhuman. But the most devastating part of her statement wasn't about the attack itself. It was about aftermath. She spoke about explaining to Rhiannon's 5-year-old son that his mother was never coming home. She described his screams of pain, and said they would haunt her for the rest of her life. Rhiannon's mother addressed Majek directly, referring to the footage of him dancing after the attack. She said, "Let me see you dancing now." She told the court that while Majek had received a life sentence, the family had received one too. The tragedy didn't stop there. The family revealed that Rhiannon's grandmother died just 2 days after the guilty verdict. The stress, the grief, the weight of the trial proved too much. This case forces difficult questions. Not about sentencing, not about evidence, but about warning signs. Majek's behavior had been noticed, commented on, but not acted on. Because discomfort doesn't always come with a clear label. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. It was a crime of fixation, of following, of watching, and then acting when isolation appeared. I'm Detective Pennyworth, and this is one of those cases that reminds you, public places don't always mean safety. Familiar routes don't guarantee protection. And violence doesn't always announce itself with chaos. Sometimes it arrives quietly, from behind. If you want to stay with these stories, the ones that examine not just what happened, but how, you can subscribe to the channel. We'll keep telling the cases that don't just demand attention, but demand understanding.